My name is Mahesh, like it says there. If it's hard to pronounce, it's okay. You guys don't have to pronounce it. We're going to talk about Xhprof today. It's a PHP extension. PHP extensions are something you write as a plugin module for PHP. It's in C layer, so usually they are very fast. They are a little hard to write, so not everyone writes it. This, in particular, was written by a bunch of engineers on Facebook. Facebook uses this to profile their PHP code. They have made sure that this works with Xhprof as well. Xhprof is their compiler, PHP compiler. It creates a C binary. If someone has not heard of Xhprof or has never used it, try it. It's pretty neat, actually. Something about myself, actually. For those who don't know me, my name is Mahesh. I work with Xhprof. We have a small startup down in Draper. I graduated about 3.5 years ago from IIT Delhi in India. If there's a problem with my accent, just speak up and I'll try to repeat myself. I had an about me slide. I somehow forgot to have that one in here.
What was the name of the startup?
Lucid Chart, Lucid Software.
Oh, okay.
We have a diagramming application. You can look it up online. I like to read. I like to go on long drives. I like to play sports, not the sort of sports the Utah people like. I care for my life a little too much. No adventure sports, please. But coming back to what interests you guys, this is just a bunch of points I picked up from Xhprof's website. It's a function level profiler. What it gives you is basically a parent-child relationship between every function which is being called, or every inbuilt function in PHP, something you did not write, that's being called, how many times it's called, memory usage, exclusive memory usage, exclusive wall time, inclusive wall time, exclusive CPU time, inclusive CPU time. So a lot of information. And once you have that information, you can do a lot of stuff with it. And I'll show you how you can do a lot of stuff with it. I learned about this tool.
What's the difference between inclusive and exclusive?
Inclusive means if you have two functions, A, and this function calls another function B. Inclusive means all the time A took from the first statement till the last statement. Exclusive means all the time you took from the first statement till the last statement, excluding other function calls. So just the amount spent by you in logic. There are a bunch of other stuff. When Facebook built it, they also created a UI layer. I'm going to show it to you guys as well. Pretty neat. Again, like I said, it's a PHP extension written in C, so very lightweight. But it's a profiler. You are not expected to use it full blown in production. So you sample it out, take 10% of your servers, just run it on 10% of your servers, but it's very lightweight, very, very lightweight. Everything else I think we have already talked about. You can, so for every run, you get a file. Every time you run a PHP script or a web page hit happens on your website and something runs on your backend, it creates a single file for that run. And that file has, for that particular call, what happened, which thing got called, who called what, how many times it was called, how much time it took, everything. And every run on a production website is a little different based on the user. Users have different sort of data. A user can be bigger, a user can be smaller. So every run is a little different. To get a good idea of how your website is doing, you want to average your runs out. It also has the functionality to do that. The other thing it does really nicely is take a diff between two runs. Let's say you're optimizing something using the output of this extension, and you optimize something. How do you know that optimization actually worked? You can take a diff of two runs, and it will show what happened, how better you did after the optimization. There's nothing much to say about this. I'm going to show you a demo, a very simple script. There's nothing much, like I said, I can say which will make a sort of impact which a code would do. But a bunch of stuff if you guys want to install it. You can look it up online. It's readily available. I actually took it from online. Since it's a Peckle extension, you can just download it using Peckle. Really easy to use. If anyone has ever used an extension in PHP before, sometimes you don't even know and you are using stuff like APC. This is something you have to put in an extension file. You will create an Xhprof.ini file, put it in a php.d directory, and that's how PHP knows that I have to start using this extension. And it has a certain variable. This variable tells you where to dump the files, where to dump the profile files we were talking about a little earlier. Nothing fancy, all part of the standard installation. I'm going to show you guys this. This is a very simple script I wrote. Is it a little hard to read? Can you guys read this?
I can't read it. Things in parentheses.
Yeah. Let's see.
Pick up blue color screen.
Any part of the projector.
Yeah. Maybe if I select the whole of it, it will be more visible. How about this?
Better, you can tell they're there.
Yeah, there. Okay, let me just explain something here. This is a very simple script I wrote in 5 minutes. It's going to find all the prime numbers till max. So here, max is set to 100, which you guys can't see. So what it's going to give you is, at the end of this script, it's going to give you all the prime numbers till max, till 100. So what it's going to do is, it starts with 2 and 3. The base cases are 2 and 3. I just assume they are there. And after that, I iterate from I equals 4, because we have already taken care of 2 and 3. I go to $max, which is 100 in this case. Then there is a inner loop. What that does is, basically go to the square root of whatever the first thing is, try to divide it. Simple prime application. If anyone does not know how to find a prime, if a number is a prime, you can take the square root of that number and try to divide it from 2 till the square root of that number. If anything divides it, it's not a prime. If nothing divides it till that number, it's a prime. You don't have to find anything beyond the square root till the number itself. It's a basic mathematical implementation. I'm going to profile this thing. One thing in particular which I have already optimized, I'm going to get rid of it, is a square root function called in between. Please don't do that. I'm going to move this terminal on my window so that I can actually edit something. What I just did was introduce bad code. This sqrt $i was earlier happening outside the for loop. What this will do is execute the square root every single time the for loop is executed. Now what I'm going to do is run the profiler on this thing and see why the profiler, or how the profiler explains that this is not right. Actually, a few more things. Once you install any extension, it usually provides you a bunch of functionalities. You can start using those functions just like that, plug and play. In this case, in this particular extension, if you want to profile any particular script, any small set of script subset, or any just 2 lines of the script, all you have to call is, before the point you want to start profiling, Xhprof enable, and after you are done, Xhprof disable. What I have done here is I've used a couple of PHP settings. In php.ini, as in PHP in general, you can make sure that every time any PHP script is executed, you want 4 lines to be executed before it, 4 lines after it. Or any script before it, any script after it. It's called prepend and append. You can change those settings in php.ini. Let me show you what I have. made it there. I wrote a couple of scripts just so that my whole script does profile. I don't want to call Xhprof enable or disable in my script itself. So I wrote a couple of scripts. These are located at these places. And I set them in php.ini as auto append and auto prepend. What this will do is, anytime PHP executes anything, it's going to run header before that script, and this before that script, and footer after that script. My header has Xhprof enable in it. My footer has Xhprof disable in it. That's how my script is going to get profiled even without me calling Xhprof enable and disable. We can take a look at both of these really quickly because they are actually very small files. They don't do anything fancy. Very hard to see.
Try hitting colon COLO space tab and see what commercial you space.
I think that do blue.
Blue.
Nice. Ignore this. This was just me testing something for my own interest. Xhprof enable, like I was trying to explain to you guys, you see it as the fourth line in the file. It takes a couple of things as parameters, which means what do you actually want to profile? CPU, memory. We want to profile everything in this particular case. You can ignore memory profiling. Every time you bring your profiling level a little down, it's even more sleeker. It's even less impactful. It's already very lightweight, but it makes it even more lightweight. A couple of files which are provided by the installation of Xhprof. Those files are imported just to make sure that we dump the final profile output to a particular place of our liking and to provide the UI, which we are going to use at a later point in time. Nothing else, like you can see, only 4 lines. The extension loaded is just a fail-safe measure that if somehow I end up deleting my extension, this code will not run. If this code was to run without my extension being installed, it will throw an exception. Because it will not find Xhprof enable as a function. Xhprof enable is accessible to us because Xhprof is installed as an extension. Tell me the command again.
Colon color COLO tab and space boost.
In this case, again, a few things which it will work even without calling these, but it will put a lot of stuff in default places. I wanted them at my particular location. Xhprof is enabled or not, stuff like that. If you don't call Xhprof disable anywhere, it's just gonna profile the whole thing anyways, but we call it since it's a footer. You see that third line. And this is just for me so that after every script execution, it gives me a URL I can hit directly in the browser and it will show me the UI. Again, most of these things are taken from an online step-by-step guide to install Xhprof and test it. Really easy stuff, really easy to find. You can just look up Xhprof and it will be there.
Is the UI part of the PECL library? Or do you have to do it?
Once you install it, you get 2 files, Xhprof runs and Xhprof lib. It comes with that. The first 2 files we included with include_ones, they give us that. Now let's execute this script we wrote and talked about. It's going to take a little time because I have a leap in there, just so that we can see what it does. It printed out all the primes it found. Apparently our algorithm works. And then it gave the location, which we explicitly did an echo on so that we can use it. This is what the default UI looks like. A lot of people have worked on different implementations of the UI. You can do whatever you want with it. It's just JavaScript and HTML. I like it as the way it is. It gives you all the information I need. We can start with all these things. You can change the namespace to start with. We set the namespace to localhost in our footer, in the footer file. It starts with all the basic stuff. The whole script took 4 seconds. The reason it took 4 seconds is because I had 2 sleeps of 2 seconds each. Otherwise, the script was doing nothing. Inclusive what? Inclusive CPU time. CPU time and wall time. Does everyone know the difference? No. CPU time is the amount of time CPU spent doing something. Wall time is the amount of time your script took to execute. CPU time, CPU cycles is what is used to compute the CPU time. If you are sleeping in your script, CPU is doing nothing. So it does not show up in the CPU time. But it will show up in the wall time because the script eventually will take into account all the sleep time. It shows all the number of calls you make. Once you grow beyond a certain level, the number of calls, they go a lot higher. If you're using any framework makes a lot of calls for you. If you have a giant code base, you are yourself going to make a lot of calls. The number of calls, it's not the best metric to optimize on, but once you reach a place where you have nothing else to optimize, optimizing the number of calls helps because basically you don't have a call stack, smaller call stack after that. The amount of peak memory usage, everything is in there. PHP can suck at memory usage as well, so these things actually become useful. We will talk about call graph, the link you see, view full call graph. It will show you a tree structure of what called what, and it will show you the path which took the most time, so that you can easily try and optimize it. This is the actual stuff you talk about when you're going to try and use this thing to optimize stuff. You can sort on any of these fields, just click on the link and it will sort. It's already sorted right now in terms of wall time. You can sort it on exclusive wall time or anything. Main is basically the parent. Everything is the parent. These are what interest us. Apparently, sleep is called twice, and it took a little more than 4 seconds. A very little amount, more than 4 seconds. So obviously we need not do sleep. If you click on sleep, it will show you how many places it was called from, who called it. The function don't do it, which is called once, internally called sleep. So once we click on sleep, it will show us that there were 2 calls to sleep. One was from don't do it function, and the other one was just out there in the bare code. And then a bunch of other functions. We are calling it Xhprof disable, printer, extension loaded. These things are nothing fancy. The other thing we see is the percentage of calls. 98.6% of the calls are in SQRT. This is the code I edited at the last moment. We have nested for loops. We go from 2 till SQRT of that number. The number at max is hinted. It just does not make sense of making 622 calls to that function. Once I go back to my original code, this number should come something below 100, because that's our maximum. Every number should be derived the SQRT square root just once. So this number should be less than 100, but it's not. And we need to fix that. The other thing we need to fix, sleep. Actually, I just wanted to show you this instead of talking about it. This is what clicking on any particular function looks like. It will tell you all the parent functions and stuff about the parents. And then you can drill down into individuals. Since this is a very simple script, less than 30 lines, there is not much. But when you're in production setup, there are a lot of functions called, a lot of things calling other things. To drill down to your basic root cause of performance degradation, this helps a lot. You can actually drill down to the function which is taking the most amount of exclusive wall time or exclusive CPU time, and then you try to optimize that function. And if your code sucks, improve it. If the code is all right, find a way to do it better. Implement an extension around it and do something with it. Use better serialization. This is very helpful in my understanding. View call graph. Is that something on it? Because I can't see it. There's supposed to be sleep here, because most of the time is spent in sleep. Xhprof creates a graph, and every node is varying in size based on how much time it took, just to make it easier for you. It's making two calls to sleep. This is sleep. One call is coming directly from the script itself. One is coming via the function don't do it, and it has darkened or enlarged the arrows while don't do it, because it thinks that flow in the code is what is consuming the most time. So if you want to optimize something, that might be your best bet. Something in that chain is not good. That's what Xhprof is trying to tell you. Let's try and optimize or change back our code to do the right thing. I'm going to just execute it again, letting the sleep be in there, because we already know the sleep was induced. The number of calls has come, number of function calls have come down to a number I would like, and this is what we optimized. We are iterating through 4 to 100. It was expected to be 97. We had 622, so obviously something was wrong. It was apparent in this case because I induced it myself. When you are profiling your production setup, you will have to go through your code, try to see why your script is n squared or n, when it has to be log n or just n, stuff like that. It definitely points you to the right direction. In the end, it's your code, so you'll have to go through it yourself and try and fix it. Anything else you guys would like to know about this thing?
What happens if you take out the sleeps?
It will not show sleeps in. Let's do it. So this is the previous sleep call. Actually, let me just comment it out instead of deleting it. And this is the function call. This function was just calling sleep internally as well. There is 2 right in there. You guys can't see it. What did I mess up? What happened? Sorry. I'm having a hard time looking from here and trying to edit stuff. Since we did not have sleep this time, it just has snappy. And function calls have come down a little more, and there is no sleep in there. So yeah, it works. You can take my word for that. Anything else you guys would like to know about how to use this?
Are you running this on production?
Not in my current company. I work for Lizardchart right now. We are not using this. When I was in Zynga, we were using this on production using a custom build tool called Xhprof. After I left Zynga, they open sourced it. I'm going to show you the GitHub link right now. It does pretty much everything I said, and it also sums up the runs. So in production setup, you don't want to profile just one run. You want to profile X amount of time to get the average response time, average call time, stuff like that. we were doing half-an-hour slots. Every half an hour we were compiling stuff, as in merging all the runs for half an hour and giving a bigger picture. And then you can compare half-an-hour runs. So anytime you release, you can compare a run before that and a run after that and see how the release performed. The tool does a lot of other stuff, but its basic merit came from this tool, this extension. What we were doing was we were using around 5 to 10% of servers, actually less than that because Zynga uses a lot of servers. We were using around 20 servers per game. We could have used more. This is very lightweight, like I said, but a good rule of thumb in production setup is don't profile unless you need to. What we were doing is we were profiling 1 call per second on 1 server for 20 servers. So don't profile more than 1 call and don't profile more than 20 servers. Even though your code is not going to be impacted, you don't have to do something which is not required. 20 servers give you a good enough understanding of what's happening in your server. Anything else?
So this creates per run 1 file like
Yep.
this. Let's say you were profiling and you wanted to find, I guess, the places where you could do the most optimization. Without opening up each file, is there a good way of doing that?
Yeah, you don't have to. That's what I was trying to say when I meant sum up your runs. So you let your website or your script run for half an hour consecutively, one after another. You will get X number of profiles, right? X number of files in a particular directory. What you can do is Xhprof allows you to sum up all the files into a single file. And then you can look up at just that file and then you give you an average of everything. The file, I should actually show you guys the file as well. It's just a simple JSON, and it has all these informations pretty neatly stacked. You can open the file yourself, build a tool around it yourself. We did do that in parts in Zynga, but it's really not anything fancy. So all the runs I did just now and before I was trying to set up my system so that I can demo you guys, it's a run ID followed by the namespace we used. Run ID is a unique number Xhprof generates for you so that every file does not have a collision. We can look at particular. It's a simple JSON. Function name, CPU time, wall time, memory usage, peak memory usage, all that stuff. So you can just parse it out and do whatever you want with this file. Facebook gave you a UI which already does that. Unless you want to do something fancy with it, I suggest stick with the UI. And you had a question, yeah?
In the call graph tree, how does it handle, like some applications, there's a kind of a main thing that everything goes into and then comes back out.
Sure.
And you might have where one run's really big and you want to see where that keeps going past the joiner.
Mm-hmm.
Does it help you do with that, or you just see everything go into the one really big square and then it going out from there? You don't see.
The call graph will have a hard time because it's a tree. A node is a node, everything coming into the node and going out of the node. What we were doing, Zynga had a similar problem. We had a dispatcher in between the code, and the dispatcher took the request, did some processing on the request, and sent it to the proper class. What we were doing was we were attaching a particular string to that function call. We changed the code a little bit ourselves for Xhprof using that. But unless you are doing fancy stuff like Zynga had to do, all you need to do is go inside the table we had, click on the function which you have, your dispatcher function, which dispatches to other places. It will show you all the parents on all the children of that function. And then you can look at the individual children, their wall time or their CPU time, whatever concerns you the most, and see the biggest violator. Go inside that and try to fix it. So you can do pretty much everything since you have the whole call graph in a table manner. Anything which is the biggest violator is what you want to fix. Did you have a question?
So if you're using, I forgot it for a second. If you're using a framework and you don't necessarily want your PHP framework profiled every time, you say, I can't change that. Can you exclude folders or functions?
You can call Xhprof disable and enable just before and after that. That's what you can do. This is a simple profiler. It's not meant to be adapted by individual frameworks. There are things out there for Java and other languages which profile everything except the framework code. This is not meant to do that. This will profile everything in its path. What you can do is disable the profiler before and after the framework code. PHP frameworks are not great to start with. They're awesome to get something running, but after a particular time you hit a bottleneck and things actually go downward after. Most of the PHP frameworks don't do really well. Anything else? I'm going to show you guys the GitHub repo for this is the tool we were using in Zynga to do exactly what I was trying to tell you. We call it Xhprof Mon because it does performance as well as monitoring. So if you go and check out the code, it does monitoring from the servers individually. It uses stats_d to actually fetch all the data from servers just about different metrics, how the server itself is behaving, and try to find number of requests we are processing on each server, stuff like that, which is not provided by the Xhprof extension itself. But if you're going to check this tool out, it will give you more than just the profiling stuff. There are two sections, if I just spend some time describing on it. Xhprof itself is just the changes Zynga made to the extension, the PHP files. The server and the client, props you can ignore, nothing much. Server is the individual server we were using to process all the games. We were processing like 25 games. So we needed an exclusive server just to process all the games all the time, every half an hour. And client is what you put on individual servers, those 20 servers I talked about. We put Xhprof on 20 servers in production for every game. Client is the binary not the binary, the RPM file we installed on every one of those servers. What we were actually doing was we were installing it on all the servers, just not calling it. But it did a bunch of stuff. It installed Xhprof. It made sure all the prepend append file was there. It made sure all the logic for 1 second profiling was there. And at the end of it, it was pushing data to the server we were using. So it profiled everything, took the Xhprof files, and threw it back to the server we processed everything on. Since we want to do the minimal amount of effort on actual game boxes, actual web servers rendering data to users, we don't want to impact those boxes. So we were doing the processing on a different offline server. And since you want to do processing on an offline server, you need to throw data at it. Client takes care of it. It lacks a little documentation, so you may have to go through the code a little bit, but it's PHP written by a set of very junior people, so you guys will be able to figure it out. It has a very neat UI. We had a very great UI designer with us. A lot of things here would not make any sense for normal PHP usage. Since it was a gaming company, we had stuff like daily active users, which is like totally something a gaming company would do and no one else, stuff like that. But most of the other stuff is very useful to everyone. You guys should check it out. This is what we were doing using the custom UI. What you see here is basically everything we saw a little while earlier. Here, we have different PHP files. So in every run, you don't execute just one file. You jump from one file to another file to another file, a big number of files in your framework or your code. It shows you every single file, how many calls were made to that file, sorted by the number of calls, and then usually your biggest offenders are the ones who are called the most number of times. So you can just, what we used to do is go to the first one, see what is the biggest offender, drill down to the function which has the highest exclusive wall time, and try to optimize that, one at a time. And using that, we came up with a lot of interesting technologies. But a lot of this UI was custom done by Zynga because we had our own implementation stuff. Like I said, half-an-hour implementations. You can't see that, but those are time slots separated by half an hour. So we used to summarize everything for half an hour because if we give every single run, it would be a lot of noise. No one will understand it. And right on the top, you can see the game name. So if you have multiple applications running on the same web server, you can segregate them, stuff like that. And a whole lot of other stuff. If you are willing to open the Xhprof JSON file, you can actually find out the 5 biggest offender functions, summarize them and find them out. We were trying to report them in a better manner, as in these are the 5 biggest offender for today, for next day, for this day. If something new comes in, then you have a red flag. Something went bad in that function, or this function was not one of the biggest offenders for the last so many days, now it is, something went wrong. Stuff like that. And there was just quite a few things going on in this tool. This was a custom implementation using StatsD, might not stand out in this context. But I would recommend checking this tool out just for Xhprof itself. It does a lot of stuff which you may want to do, but don't have time for. This will be the last thing I talk about. Any question?
Have you ever used like New Relic or any of the online?
Yeah, we are actually using New Relic at Lucidchart. New Relic does a lot of great stuff for you. It will show you the average response time, how much time you spend in database, how much time you spend in the application itself, external calls. It does not do function level profiling. So you know that your app is sucking, or your database is sucking, or the calls you're making to your external services is not great. But it does not give you pointers to where to go to and optimize stuff. This tool does that. And again, it's just a function level profiler. You can't actually try and do like a Java heap dump. It does not work like that. Anything else? I'm going to try and post this on our STPHP website, these slides, but I used these 2 references. Xhprof is also open source by Facebook. You guys can check it out. It's the extension, so basically you take that code, you create an extension out of it, and push it to your server. The other one is the Xhprof repo I showed you guys just now, and that's it.
What database did you guys use?
At Zynga? We were using MySQL. MySQL is great to scale. Once you start scaling with MySQL, it loses all the relational database features, but it can scale. The other things which are supposed to scale out of the box, like MongoDB and stuff like that, yeah, the complexity increases as you add more stuff.
Yeah.
Stuff like HBase or Hadoop, these installations just don't make sense for small startups because they are very expensive to manage as well as create. The smaller things which do make sense, like Mongo, which is supposed to scale out of the box, it makes a lot of sense, but as you add more shards, it does not do payloads properly, or sharding is not great. If you're doing a lot of heavy writes, it just stops balancing stuff. It does stuff which you may not want to do, but if it suits your use case, it does suit your use case. MySQL, on the other hand, there is a lot of documentation, there is a great community out there, there are a lot of people who already know about it, and big giants are already using it. Facebook uses MySQL at a very big scale and they're still working. Facebook is the biggest company out there in terms of scale. And since they are able to successfully use MySQL, it means that it can be scaled. And that's very comforting to know the tool you are using is, it's possible to scale. Going into a black box, it's hard. Yeah.
Had Zynga started modifying the MySQL source?
No, Zynga was not contributing to MySQL. Facebook does. Facebook contributes to MySQL.
Was it a clustered environment for MySQL or standard?
We were using MySQL for offline stuff. This particular tool, Xhprof, we were using MySQL. It was not rendering production data. Everything internal was using MySQL, production in Zynga was doing key value store, memcache, membase, because every time we wanted something, we wanted the whole of it, as in the user data. We wanted all the user data. So we just made it key value. User ID is the key, value is the whole JSON, compressed user data, just throw it out there. In production, we were using membase to be precise.
Was that value like a JSON value?
We started with the normal array being PHP serialized and compressed at the memcache layer. What we ended up doing in the last phase of the implementation of membase was we were using IG binary serialization. IG binary serialization is basically a serialization format. It's an extension. You can use it out of the box. All you have to do is call IG binary underscore serialize. It's very compressed. It gives you a binary format, so you can't read it like you can read PHP serialized format or JSON. But it's very compressed, and it's done in a way that it's very fast. It's an extension, so it's fast by default, but it's very small as well. It's compressed, so it's very fast. And then when you actually do the zzip of that compressed file, it becomes even smaller. That's what we were doing. We were taking any data we had, calling IG binary serialize on it, throwing it to memcache. Memcache layer did the actual compressing, and then stored it at a persistent level. Anything else? All right.